Hello, I am Mantastic and Fantastic, and today I'm going to be talking about the Full Metal Alchemist Collab that's coming to North America in Puzzle & Dragons. So, the Full Metal Alchemist Collab is one of the more highly anticipated collabs to come because it features one of the most game-changing cards in the game, Edward. Unfortunately, the rest of the collab is quite lackluster overall, and there's really only one real prize. Like, there's not even really much of a consolation prize at that matter. So you're basically going to be gambling away 5 magic stones each time and praying you hit Edward. But since this is the first time this event has come since the Reg Machine Renewal rolling rate disclosure, we'll actually be able to see the rolling rates. Japan did not get to see the rolling rates because this collab came a long time ago, but we'll be the first ones to see it. But people are estimating between, say, 2 and 5% for rolling a 6-star card. We don't know what it's going to be, but regardless, it's going to be quite the challenge, and it's going to be quite possibly expensive just to get one card. Because this is kind of the trend that Puzzle & Dragons is following, in that they release super game-changing, somewhat broken cards that are only available in collabs. So you have to basically gamble away your stones on these special machines, but if there's not enough value as collateral damage value at the bottom, it's going to be quite challenging to justify. So let's take a look at what this collab actually has to offer, unless it's really just Edward. So there are 4 6-star cards and 6 5-star cards available, but unfortunately it's really just Edward as the real main prize. Like, he's kind of in his own tier, like he's like his own Edward tier. He's just incredibly powerful. We have one in A, we have one in B, most of them in C, and one in D. So, like, this collab doesn't look very pleasant. Like, it's very unbalanced overall, and this is going to be problematic, I feel, for the most part. And again, rankings within each tier are just in a random order. Just look at the actual letter grades themselves. But regardless if a card is ranked D or Edward, you should always keep the card if it's the very first time you actually roll them, because you never know, things might get buffed in the future. So who is Edward, and what is all this hype and fuss all about? So Edward is easily, hands down, the most valuable card in this whole collab, and possibly the most valuable card in Puzzle & Dragons, perhaps. And this is because he's able to form one of the best possible teams in the game, and it may be a little misleading if you just look at his multiplier on paper and you don't take into account any of the other factors, because his leader skill allows you to have 144 times attack and 57.75% damage reduction. However, you have to be above 50% health to trigger the damage reduction and your full multiplier, and you also need to make 6 or more combos. So 6 or more combos is no big deal. Like, that's like child's play at this point in time, so we don't have to worry about that. So the main focus is, can we keep ourselves above 50%? And you may think, well, this is kind of challenging, this could be problematic, but in actuality, it's not as bad as you may think it is, and it's definitely a little bit of a drawback, but he has enough built-in abilities to kind of keep himself sustained. So his leadership potential is somewhat unrivaled because you have pretty much one of the easiest activation requirements possible. Again, 6 combos is really nothing at this point in time. There are no team building restrictions, so you can use any type of card, any color card, as well as having high survivability. Now, that damage mitigation component is actually quite meaningful because you can tank 100% or 99% gravities and still have your health above 50%. So you can take these large gravities and still be in your sweet zone for your damage component. And this is quite powerful because you are able to actually heal up in between turns, and if you heal up before their next attack, you actually experience the damage reduction component still, which is kind of unusual. You don't get the extra damage output, but you get the shielding component. So, like, let's say you're at 40% health, you match away and you heal back up to 65%. Now that you're above 50, you get the shielding component, but you don't get the full multiplier. So this can lead to kind of an interesting way to stall, and a way to get out of it is either use a delay or use his base active skill. Now, this 144 times does not actually sound that impressive. Like, you look at other cards out there, they have much higher multipliers. But the thing is, Edward comes with 2 7-combo awakenings, and you bring any sub you want, so you can always stack cards with multiple 7-combo awakenings, and each 7-combo awakening adds 2 times damage. So Edward by himself is giving 4 times damage to himself as well as your friend leader. So your 2 leaders, when you hit 7 or more combos, you are going to be dealing approximately 576 times damage. If you have triple 7-combo cards like Ideal, it's 1,152 times damage. So this is where you can see why the damage can somewhat get out of control. Just bring all cards with at least 2 7-combo awakenings, you have an effective 576 times multiplier. That is fantastic. And again, no restrictions on the colors you match. You can make a bi-elemental board of, say, light and dark, and only bring light and dark cards, and you're on your merry little way. So Due to this flexible leader skill, we need to keep some points in the back of our head for what we want to do for team building, at least a more optimal way. So here are some key points that I like to try and keep in mind if I were to get Edward. I doubt I will. But you want to have full color coverage, and I'll explain why shortly. You want to utilize subs with the 7 combo awakening, as kind of explained before. It's how you get your damage output. You want to prioritize cards with high amounts of health, because the more health you have, the easier it is to stay above 50% and maintain that nice threshold. And then obviously bring follow-up attack as needed, as well as additional shields and delays. Again, it's all based on the dungeon by dungeon basis. So full color coverage seems a little unusual, but the thing is, Edward has the skill charge awakening. And even though you do not need to match all 5 colors every turn, if you do, you give Edward and your friend Edward 1 turn of personal haste. And that allows you to basically charge up his actually long cooldown base active skill much more efficiently. And that active is actually quite valuable for himself, because he does need that active skill to sustain himself, as well as providing higher burst damage. So it is valuable to have rainbow coverage. So what you could do is just easily bring a team of just light cards with different sub-attributes. So for instance, you could use the Alphonse, who's one of the other cards here, for yellow and for the light and the green subtyping. You can use Ideal for the dark. You get the kind of general idea how you can pick and choose the colors you want to have from their sub-attributes. Now, again, 7 combos allows you to have that low multiplier become blisteringly high. And when you are trying to choose cards, say you found a card that has like similar double 7 combos, double, say like for example, you want to have a follow-up attack card, and you can have Scald or Amatsu. Now, usually Amatsu is the best choice in most cases, and this is no exception, but it's even more important because Amatsu has huge amounts of health. And the difference in health, like let's say even if it's only 1,000, I know it's not between Amatsu and Skull, but let's say it's just 1,000. That goes a long way, because the damage mitigation component helps reduce more damage, as well as keeping your health higher, so you stay in that 50% threshold easier. So every point of health does make actually quite a big difference on Edward teams, because the damage reduction, as well as making it so you may not need to use Edward's base active, because if you can get away with not using an active skill, that's always better, and that's what you should try and achieve for the most part. And again, follow-up attack, delays, and shields, you bring them on a case-by-case basis. If the dungeon has something stupidly high as a preemptive, bring a shield, that sort of idea. So his active skill and awakening. So his active skill has a 20-turn cooldown, which is very unfortunate, but it's very normal for cards with the skill charge awakening. For the most part, Gung Ho gives them a longer base active skill cooldown, but with the skill charge, you're able to get that personal haste to cycle it up faster, so it becomes more normalized, so to speak, compared to other active skills with that same level of value. Now, that obviously makes it so they cannot be used as an inherit very well, because, well, you inherit them, they don't get the skill charge, that base card, so it kind of defeats the purpose, as well as if you use them as a sub on other teams, you need to make sure you have full rainbow coverage, otherwise he will never charge up fast enough. So that is a little bit of a drawback, of course, but the thing is, on his own team, when you can control the cards you bring, it's going to be quite easy to activate his skill charge component. And his base active skill gives you a full heal, as well as taking away hearts and hazard orbs into light. So that does improve your damage output. You don't need the heart orbs anymore because you've already healed to full health. And it's a great active to kind of utilize as kind of your burst kill board, so to speak. Because you can use, like, say, another board changer. You can use Edward in conjunction. You can do large amounts of damage. So this is important, like his base active, and you generally don't want to override his base active. It's kind of like how Yogg works. You don't really want to override Yogg's base active because you need that healing component to stay above your threshold to deal damage. Kind of the similar train of thought for Edward. Maybe if you inherit a Yogg over top of Edward, maybe that can work, like those sort of ideas, but it's really hard to justify losing his base active skill overall. So in summary, Edward is incredible. Like, it's going to be one of the most powerful cards you could probably pull for a long time moving forward, and if you are fortunate enough to have them, you're going to have a great time. So now everything's kind of going to go from downhill from here. Like, the Full Metal Alchemist collab could have really just been called the Edward collab. Edward plus fodder. It wouldn't have been like a misleading title. So now we have Alphonse, who is the next best card in this collab. So they have reasonable potential overall, but they just look weak compared to Edward, which is kind of the true for any other card, to be honest. But Alphonse has a Dark Cali style board changer, so you make all 5 colors as well as hearts, as well as a 50% damage reduction component. So That's a reasonable value active skill because nowadays we don't need to have the board flooded with a particular color. You just want a board that has lots of combos available. So being able to heal and make lots of combos as well as having a shield is actually quite reasonable overall. Furthermore, he also has full bind immunity, 2 skill boosts, and a follow-up attack. And that's quite rare because most follow-up attack cards don't even have 2 skill boosts. Like if you look at Skald, Verdandi, I think, as well as Ryune and Sylvie and all those other options, I think they only have 1 skill boost. So having 2 can make a difference, especially in solo mode, as well as being bind immune. The only other major follow-up attack card I can think of with bind immunity is Amatsu and the Monster Hunter collab, the purple one whose name I can't pronounce. Like most follow-up attack options are not bind immune, so this is a nice little niche he's help fulfilling, helps you build more full bind immune teams. However, his true value kind of shines when he's on Edward team, which is kind of amusing because you need Edward to truly make him work out because he's light primary typing, so then you have more damage, more consistency. You have full bind immunity, so you can build more full bind immune teams. Stick in several ideals, Alphonse and Amatsu, full color coverage, lots of damage, lots of happiness essentially. So it is quite powerful. And as a leader, like, it has some potential. It is still 144 times, but you have to match 4 out of 5 colors, so the consistency compared to Edward is much lower, and you don't have any damage reduction or health multiplier. Yes, you have recovery, but that only activates when you match your colors, so it's kind of like, I'm going to deal damage in order to heal. So stalling is problematic, just not as efficient overall compared to Edward, unfortunately. Roy Mustang is another 6-star card, and he does have a powerful double orb changer. It converts, if I'm not mistaken, green and purple to fire. So yes, you can have a nice double orb changer that does not remove hearts, as well as enhancing them at the same time. Unfortunately, monocolor teams in endgame content doesn't really fly because they are too orb hungry. Like, you're going to starve and run out of orbs, and then you're going to have a problematic time unless you keep popping actives, but then you have to assume the dungeon's short. And Roy doesn't have any notable defensive multiplier outside of recovery, but that only works if you match multiple red combos. So again, it's problematic. So it's hard to really justify him as a leader. As a sub, again, it might make too many red orbs that you can't combo board efficiently, so combo-based teams don't want to use him. So perhaps we can use him as maybe a niche sub or inherit on special fire row farming teams. So Glavenus Hunter is kind of the big in thing for button style farming teams. You can use machine goemons and you have such a good time. Now, if you throw in a Roy Mustang, you can have a nice powerful double orb changer with the enhanced component to potentially push your damage higher. But what you can actually utilize is use a Red Sonja board. So let's say you have Red Sonja in her weapon assist evolution. You stick her on a low cooldown card that has particular awakenings you need for the dungeon, and then you pop the Red Sonja Inherit, then you pop Roy Mustang. You have a full board of red, which is what you could do with Machine Goemon, but you get the enhanced component. So yes, you're using 2 actives, but you have to use 2 actives to get board plus enhance. So why not? It can be a niche situation where you can utilize Roy Mustang's active well, but again, it's kind of middling for the most part. You don't need to use it, I feel, overall. Like, again, just Machine Goemons and stick a carrot on someone. That usually ends up working better for the most part. And now we come to King Bradley. So King Bradley is an interesting card. He has an active skill that deals 150,000 true damage to an enemy 5 times. It will switch to a different target if they've actually perished. Now, this looks a little weird because you're dealing 750,000 damage total, which is lower compared to other button options like Grimjaw. So you're thinking, well, how can we really utilize it and where does it have potential? Well, the true damage component is important because you're able to basically punch through anything of high defense, as well as switching targets midway through. So if lots of, say, pre-draws or pies, you can easily go bam, 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 they're all dead. So that does have a little bit of advantage, but by having each hit staggered is important for slipping underneath damage absorption spawns. So for example, Parvati and Sopdet, they absorb damage anything over 200 and 300,000 respectively. So by doing 150,000 damage 5 times, you're slipping underneath the resolve and actually going hit, 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 and you actually end up doing still 750,000 damage total. Now, you may think, wow, that's kind of cool, but the problem is those spawns have more health than 750,000, so it's not actually going to actually solve your problem. You have to actually whittle them down, then you can kind of execute them. That's a lot of effort. Or you bring like 3 King Bradleys to kill 1 Sopdet. Not efficient overall. Like, the thing is, we have various Fujin-style active skills, and because of that, we don't really need to have a funny button that can deal with them because it's not guaranteed to actually kill them. Like, you have to get them low, then you can button through. Maybe you can dodge Parvati's Jam or Resolve mechanic, but that's not really that destructive overall. Like, you can get around it, to be honest. Like, you can survive it. So it's just very awkward, I feel, for the most part. Like, because Fujin will guarantee you kill the spawn, King Bradley does not, so he's not really fulfilling much niches. Maybe you can argue that you can use him in ranking dungeons where you need to actually punch through certain spawns that have lowish amounts of health. But the thing is, he does less damage than Grimjaw style active skills, as well as having a longer animation time because you have to go through those 5 hits. So it's slower, it does less damage, so he's not really fulfilling any real niche that effectively, not efficient against Parvati and Soptit. So he's just a problematic card overall. Like, it could have been cooler, but it's just not going to pan out. And then some people think, well, he does make a 7x6 board, but he's unfortunately terribly orb hungry, as well as Diablos just being a better option because you don't need a budget 7x6 leader when you can just pair with a friend Diablos. Like, there's no point. And now we come to 5-star base cards. So unfortunately, for the most part, these are all quite middling and lackluster, but we're still going to go through them anyways. So Winry Rockbell. So Winry has quite an interesting active skill. It's something that I thought was kind of unique. It provides you with 30% maximum health heal every turn for 4 turns, as well as 30% damage reduction every turn for 4 turns. So this is kind of a unique twist, so to speak, on stalling through challenging spawns or sustaining yourself. But the problem is, it's not that efficient or effective overall, and you will probably have better luck using just a regular shielding option for the most part. Because the thing is, the healing component works like those auto heal awakenings in that you match your combos, you do your damage, and then you heal afterwards. So you're not actually pushing your health up before you match. So health sensitive cards like Yogg and Edward don't receive their damage multiplier component if they're below their threshold and they heal up through Winry Rockbell, so that's problematic. But I guess on the bright side, you do receive the damage mitigation component for Edwards. So you don't get the damage boost, you get the damage reduction component. So it's like, well, that's kind of nice, but not really that effective. So again, you're probably going to want to use just a regular shielding active. Like stick on Indra, stick on Susanoo, you enjoy much more shielding instead of something that's a little weaker with a bit of sustain. So it's a cool idea, but it doesn't pan out. If they had healed before you matched, then it could have been significantly more valuable and possibly one of the better active skills to have on those types of teams. Rize Hawk has kind of a middling kit because, yes, they remove 3 turns of Vulcan Binds, as well as and then they also do 40 true damage to a single enemy 3 times. Well, sure, I can do true damage and pick off things, but 3 turns of Woken Bind clearing is nowhere near as effective. Everyone potentially has Odin Dragon at this point in time because of the last monthly quest, so we do have ways to deal with Awoken Bind clearing, and Odin Dragon is just way better at it. So you're thinking, well, where can I use this true damage? Well, we have so many ways to deal with high defense spawns that is not that meaningful. However, the most niche and situational place where I can feel Rize Hawkeye can possibly excel is dealing with spawns that have tiny damage void thresholds. So Dark Metatron Tamadra and the fully evolved Zeal spawns, they fit that criteria. They have tiny amounts of health, but they also have a tiny damage void threshold. And by doing 40 damage, you're able to sneak underneath it and kill them all off. So we could kill those spawns anyways. It wasn't like they were terribly hard to deal with overall, but we have a way to do so in a more time-efficient manner. So some players who need to farm that particular dungeon very quickly, many times, will find value in Hawkeye's active skill. So it's situational, but at least there's an interesting way to use it. And we have May Hughes, and they have an orb unlock and a +1 combo count for 1 turn on a 6-turn cooldown. So cool, you do some interesting things, but most meta endgame teams don't really have a place for that. Like Diao Chan is much better at orb unlocking because it's a shorter cooldown. +1 combo count, not really enough for most things. You would use something better, like Kusanagi is usually better. If you want +1 combo count, you get a shield and the combo. Like it's combining 2 mediocre components that doesn't really make him that strong. And the cooldown's like 6 turns. It's kind of in the middle of value overall, so it's kind of hard to truly justify their usage in those types of teams. You probably have better options anyways, but I guess their interesting niche is that they have 3 skillbind resists, and that does give some value if you're really starved, which is hard to do, but the most practical application would be on Liu Bei teams, where the skillbind resists are somewhat welcomed, as well as having some wood rows and having the orb unlock. So it does give some interesting applications, but it's mostly for like Lubé farming, but that's kind of for people who don't have Glavenus Hunter, because Glavenus Hunter is usually the better option for the most part. So overall, he may feel like a huge waste of magic stones, but that's another story. Alex Lewis Armstrong. So he's got more facial hair than actual head hair, and he's quite buff, but unfortunately he's probably the worst card in this collab, I would say, for the most part, because his active skill gives you the ability to convert all hazards into light. So it's kind of like, well, cool, I can take jammers and poisons away, but if I didn't have jammers and poisons, I don't get an orb changer. So it's kind of like, well, that's awkward. And then he does have 3 turns of 50% chance of enhanced orbs sky falling down. So cool, I can enhance orbs as they fall down, but we don't really need those enhanced orbs. The extra damage is not that meaningful for the most part. So maybe we can argue that, well, we'll have more enhanced heal orbs so we get more healing. But again, really situational for the most part. So it's just his active is so lackluster. You're not going to use him as a sub because his awakenings are poor, his stats are poor. Like, he's just an awkward card to use overall. I have no idea if he's really interesting in the actual Full Metal Alchemist universe, but in here he's quite sad. So we now have Scar, and the best way to think of Scar is that they're basically an inheritable Angie, as you can reduce all enemies' defense to 0 along with a 50 times attack of all your team's dark value. So you think, well, I can do some button damage and I can do some damage voiding at the same time, but the thing is, sure, I can kill a high defense card, but we have so many different ways to kill high defense spawns anyways, and I could probably just farm like raw Tamadras and that's why I used a button through Tamadra infestation anyways, so I don't need a Scar. Also, Scar has a much longer cooldown at the same time. And we're thinking, well, I get 50 times dark attack value. Well, we have the Dark Male Hunter instead, and that's more efficient overall because they come with the co-op boost Awakening. And because Scar's base cooldown is so long, it's going to be challenging to inherit him on top of a card with the co-op boost Awakening and have enough skill boosts overall. So you can see why this is becoming problematic. Like Scar, like, it sounds cool, but it's not really that meaningful overall. Like, budget players can find budget solutions for button farming. Extremely high-end players who have basically every card will probably want to use Dark Male Hunter anyway, so he's not appealing to any pocket of players, so he's just kind of middling. But I guess if you have a bunch of Scars, maybe you can do kind of a weird button Scar system, but not that great overall. And now we come to Ling Yao, who is the final card in the Full Metal Alchemist collab. And they are a niche card, but they are probably the best 5-star available. Like, they do provide 100% damage reduction for 1 turn, as well as 2 times attack for wood and dark cards on an 18-turn cooldown. So the 18-turn cooldown is quite long and problematic overall. And in all honesty, if they had gotten rid of the 2 times attack component, which is kind of lackluster anyways, he would have been a lot shorter cooldown and a lot more valuable overall because, again, we want to have shorter cooldowns to inherit more easily. So this 100% damage mitigation has situational value. Like, it's obviously great against spawns that do way too much damage that even a 75% shield wouldn't save you from. It's also great for health-sensitive teams like, say, Yogg or Zeus Verse, who have to stay at very high amounts of health in order to actually activate their damage. So by reducing everything down to 0, obviously you're going to have a much better time. And it doesn't actually disrupt your board. Like, you can use Raphael, but Raphael disrupts your board, so it's kind of like, well, it may not have accomplished as much because you kind of waste a turn of that damage reduction from a full board of hearts. So again, it's kind of niche and situational. You could use Ganesha as well, but again, we're just trying to think, like, how can we utilize them well? So it's basically 100% reduction that does not disrupt your board. That's the best way to look at it. So it does have decent value, can be used on certain teams if you need to survive like truly outrageous hits. So in conclusion, the Full Metal Alchemist collab is incredibly top heavy, but it's really just Edward heavy. Edward is by far the shining prize in this event. Like, nothing else is really that special or that meaningful. So if you are willing to roll in this collab, you're thinking, well, I really want Edward if you want from a usability point of view. Everything else is kind of middling. But with all that being said, a lot of players love the Full Metal Alchemist universe, so obviously there's some nostalgia or love for the individual characters and cards. So if you are rolling for those, obviously that's great. But if you're looking for value from a collab, it's hard to really justify using your stones here because there's only one good chase card. If you compare it to, say, like Dragonbound, Dragoncaller, Heroine, and Monster Hunter, they had much better value at the bottom, but they even had more diverse value at the top. This collab is just Edward, nothing else. At least Dragonbound, Dragoncaller, it had such good value at the very bottom. You could roll 5 stars and still be happy. So let me know what you think about the Full Metal Alchemist collab in the comments below. Do you plan on rolling heavily, and who do you hope to roll? Hopefully you all have a fantastic day. Wish you all the best of luck in your own pad adventures, and happy puzzling.